I should put up a section on methodology from the book. I don't know if you have already started going through the course. I didn't do this in the beginning, but nothing lost. The main thing I would like to say myself as a modeler is that prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. This was said by Nobel laureate Niels Bohr, who first described the structure of the atom with the protons, neutrons, and the cloud of electrons. But it's also attributed to the famous wise man Yogi Berra, New York Yankees player. He said apparently it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So I don't know whether he got this attributed to him wrongly or rightly, but either way, when we want to worry about the future, especially for climate projections, climate actions, there is a need for models, and models have assumptions, and even the dynamic models driven by first principles have uncertainties, and there are some ideas about what the uncertainty is like or where it comes from and what is its range and so on as we go into the future. But there, especially beyond 2050, the uncertainty of the scenarios we make for future projections about population growth, about technology evolution, about carbon capture sequestration, combination of energy portfolios, renewable versus coal, non-coal, fossil fuel, etc., will begin to add up the uncertainties into the projections we are making. For example, here, for all the calculations that we have discussed, or if you're starting here, that we will discuss, take the population projection from 2015 UN report, which had a low, medium and high projection, and the medium projection ends up at 9.72 billion by 2050. Is this the number that's going to remain steadfast? Not necessarily, because the new projection by 2020 would be different, because as one of the topics we discuss here, family planning, educating girls itself is a big contributor to reducing populations. So we have to keep that in mind. Nonetheless, the whole book is built on working towards drawdown. Each of the solution does one or more of the following to be counted as drawing down. Reduce energy use through efficiency, material reduction, or resource productivity. Replace existing energy sources with renewable energy systems. So there are various assumptions in terms of how much that growth of renewable energy systems will be in terms of the total energy production. Sequester carbon in soils, plants, and kelp through regenerative farming, grazing, ocean and forest practices. So again, carbon cycle is a tough nut to crack in terms of, for example, even knowing where all the carbon has been going that we have been emitting since Industrial Revolution. The emitted carbon from fossil fuels is very easy to count because it's kept track very closely, because it's a commercial product, a very valuable one at that, and we know how much carbon is emitted from each pound or each kilogram of those fossil fuels. But when we look at what is accumulating in the atmosphere, which is easy enough to measure, and we want to know how much is in the ocean and land and elsewhere, then it's not such an easy calculation or easy to monitor and estimate. So research for every solution consists of a three-step process that's presented here: technical reports, review process, and integration models. Okay, I won't go into the details, but just remember that there are deliberate, diligent ways in which everything is followed through. It's scientifically rigorous. Uncertainty doesn't mean there is a lack of scientific rigor. It just means that there are irreducible uncertainties in the scientific system itself that we must quantify as best as we can and be aware of what we know and what we don't know. Since Project Drawdown's objective was to look at the combined effect of all the solutions, 14 integration models were developed for a grouping of solutions that share common data sets and inputs. And there are a bunch of assumptions that go into each of these models that I won't list in detail, but some of them are listed in the back of the book in this methodology section. So we've already seen what these are: agriculture, building envelope, building systems, electricity generation, family planning, food systems, forest management, freight transport, heating and cooling, lighting, livestock management, passenger transport, urban transport, and waste diversion. So double counting is avoided, and so on and so forth. So all care is taken for presenting the numbers with the best scientific rigor. Of course, they may be updated as we go along. Scenarios are needed for making these future projections. The data shown throughout Drawdown represents the incremental impact, cost, and/or savings of an ambitious but plausible adoption of the respective solutions when compared to a 30-year period in which growth is fixed at current levels relative to market size. So you assume, for example, that renewable energy currently constitutes 24% of the world energy use, solar, wind, hydroelectric at utility scale, biomass, waste, wave, tidal, and geothermal. So you assume that the future projections are incremental over what is at present, so 24%. If it remains 24%, it's not given any additional value, it's counted as zero, and you all the calculations are measure the additional percentage of energy generation created in each category compared to what is today. And there are additional calculations made where you say, for example, biomass waste are not that environmentally friendly, so what if renewable is accomplished without those? Okay, so those kinds of details are also accounted for. As for costing, I have always mentioned that pay attention but be careful because they are somewhat confusing. So the first cost, or total cost to implement of first cost of all the model solution is 129 trillion over 30 years, equivalent to $440 per person per year, with the population as mentioned. A more illuminating number, however, is the net cost, which is what we always showed. How much more energy would be required to implement climate solutions compared to the cost of repeating business as usual? So if we don't do anything, then what would be the cost? And net cost is what is additional to change business as usual. Make sense? Net cost is a lower number than first cost. We calculate the difference in costs between a solar farm and a coal-fired plant, for example, and between an electric transport system and one fueled by oil. So always have to be careful how net cost and net benefits are actually counted, because we saw many negative numbers, if you remember, right? So the net result, there are many ways in which these are ranked. So this is the ranking from 1 to 15. Total of 80 solutions are there, of course. Among each there are details. And plausible scenarios, the ranking is done for drawdown scenario. So you can see here gigatons reduced are different for each one of them. And then optimum scenarios, where you wish for the best solutions for, let's say, refrigeration, wind turbines, and so on and so forth. And again, you see the gigatons reduced are different. So without going into details, you can just see that these are ranked from refrigeration, wind turbines, reduced food waste, plant-rich diet, tropical forests, educating girls, and so on, down to afforestation. Okay, so just keep these in mind when you consider all the podcasts on different aspects of drawdown, but just remember the solutions proposed, so that there is always a choice and socio-technical transformations of making new choices of behavioral changes or energy system changes, transportation system changes, food system changes, and so on, are always complicated, associated with many socioeconomic issues, disparities, equities, disparate impacts, and who will fund it, and so on and so forth. So keeping that in mind, enjoy the course. This basically concludes the course, but I will add details from other books to the climate solutions overall, but this is the conclusion of the Drawdown book and the course based on that.